This is what is it, November 20th, 2012, and I'm talking about the excitement over the legalization in Washington and Colorado. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news or the one who dampers people's spirits. I don't need to be negative all the time, but listen, we got to be realistic here. Is cannabis really legal in a state where it's still Schedule 1 on a state and a federal level? I don't think it is. I don't mean to be, so negative, and I do think there's positive things. Like I say, I think that Washington and Colorado are seeing these cases of marijuana possession getting dismissed, and that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. That's awesome. I think there's going to be more of that. There's going to be a lot less people getting arrested for possession in these states. Great. That's wonderful. But you can't really, intellectually, honestly say cannabis is legal in a state where it's still a Schedule 1, and where it's illegal still to pass a joint or give your friend a nug or drive with more than 5 nanograms in your system if you're over 21, or none if you're under 21. It's still illegal to grow in your own home. It's still illegal to smoke in public or display cannabis in any public setting. Washington has so many restrictions on it that it can't be legal. It might be a narrow legal exception, but it's not legal. So don't get your hopes up like cannabis prohibition is ending because of what Washington did. If every state in the nation did exactly what Washington did, we'd be in a worse position than we are now. I mean, when in California, if everybody did what California did, and I'm not saying decriminalization is better than legalization, I'm just saying that Washington did not legalize. They didn't legalize. It absolutely is a false flag to say Washington legalized. But let's say if everybody in the nation did what Washington did, well, we'd have new per se DUID limits, nobody would have home grows, there would be a 90% tax on cannabis in a legal environment, it would still be a Schedule 1 on a state level, so they're not going to give licenses for a legal environment. Nobody's going to be selling cannabis in a commercial environment legally. That's just not going to happen. So if every state in the nation did that, that's not a step forward, that's 3 steps backwards. So yeah, it's great that people are not going to be arrested as much for cannabis, but the Washington State financial report for I-502 said they're expecting $2.5 million of new revenue from DUID arrests. So that means they're going to be pursuing that revenue. There's no reason why they wouldn't. The budget is in a shortfall. Washington State needs to collect revenue. They're already predicting more money coming in from DUID arrest. Why wouldn't they do that? So, if the rest of the country did what Washington did, they would see potentially higher DUID arrests, no legal market, no home grows, no distribution, no passing a joint, no displaying in public. Cannabis consumers would still be sitting in the back of the bus. It may have some good aspects to it, but like I say, it's 1 step forward, it's 3 steps back. Now, if everybody did what California did with SB 1449, cannabis would no longer be a criminal offense. There would be no profit motivation for cops to arrest people for cannabis possession under an ounce, because it's only a $100 fine. So it would cost more for the courts and the cops to prosecute people than it would for them just to leave people alone. They didn't put any new DUID restrictions when they passed SB 1449, and you can't go to jail, you don't have a criminal record, you don't get arrested for under an ounce here in California. That's progress. When they don't add new penalties, and when they don't add new restrictions and crazy taxes and all these other burdens, real progress comes when they repeal the prohibition and they don't add anything new. That's real progress. Colorado made real progress. They can have home grows. They've set up a distribution licensing system, which probably won't go in effect very smoothly. Probably way more smoothly than Washington. I would expect Colorado to, actually have retail markets beyond and first before Washington. In this current environment, in the current law, unless something else changes in Washington, which it doesn't look like it's going to change for at least 2 years. But I think that there was progress made in some aspects, but the regress has been so costly and will be so costly in the future that we can't really consider this a victory. you know, it has some good aspects. It has a lot more bad aspects. That's all I'm saying. I'm not trying to be Captain Negative here. And then the people who are on Facebook, you know, who are talking about this are like, oh, you know, anti-502 people, you ought to be whining and crying and reaping and moaning now. Look, it passed. Hooray, you guys suck. That doesn't help anybody. That doesn't help anybody. You know, the point is getting the information out there and working with what we've got. Yeah, there's going to be celebrations from people who are against I-502 because, you know, an ounce is legally able to be possessed. And people ought to be defending that right now and you know, going forth with exercising their rights and celebrating that. No problem. I don't have any problem with that. I don't see any reason to have a problem with that. Yeah, sure, a lot of I-502 opposers are going to be celebrating the fact that they can smoke an ounce without getting harassed. They can't do it in public. They can't pass a joint. They can't distribute to their friends. They can't give their buddy a nug. They can't drive with over 5 nanograms in their blood if they're over 21. So, you know, there's some reason to celebrate, and there's some reason to be pessimistic and mourn the loss of some freedoms that we once had, especially with driving, you know, especially with driving. But, you know, how does it help when people are antagonizing those who were opposed to I-502? You know, they're like, oh, you guys shouldn't be celebrating. You guys were opposed to I-502. You know, forget you. If you don't see the reason why people were opposing I-502, then you just don't get it. You know, it's not an us versus them thing. I don't get that. You know, Normal's played that for so long. It's us versus them. The legalizers versus the opposers. It was the same thing with Prop 19. I was in favor of Prop 19, so I got a little bit of flack myself from the opposition. But Normal was calling people out, especially Russ Belville. You know, that Dragonfly, De La Luz, J. Craig Canada, you know, a lot of these people who are opposed to it, and we're just calling them out on the most, you know, silly notions of, you know, you guys suck, and we hate you, and look at us, we're great, and you guys are the lame-ass people in the movement, fuck you, and all that. That's what Normal was doing. And Normal is still doing that. And that's why I oppose Normal. I don't get into that divisive bullshit. You know, I lay out the facts. Marijuana is not legalized in any state where it's still a Schedule I drug. And until we can overcome the scheduling, there's not really much to celebrate. There's little things to celebrate, but there's not really any legalization to celebrate yet. It's not legalized, you know. Give it a break, you know. We don't give people a false sense of security. That's my point. Don't let people think that it's legalized when it's really not, so that they become complacent and they don't work for future reform. You know, if everybody's celebrating, oh, it's legal, our job's done. Hey, let's move on now. That's not how it is. It's not done. There's still a lot more prohibition to fight. And there's new prohibitions now that I-502 passed. Prohibitions that didn't exist previous. These per se laws, they didn't exist previously. You know? And so there's new prohibitions to fight, and there's old prohibitions to fight. That's where we're at now. So that's all I'm saying. These people who want to create strife and you know, do all the name calling. I had John Hamm from Normal, Ganja John, threatening me. I've got it recorded. Threatening me before I-502 passed because I was opposed to it. That's the kind of ilk that I'm trying to combat here. And so maybe I do get a little negative. Maybe I do get a little combative. I'm sorry for that. That's not the right way to approach this. The right way to approach this is to get organized and move forward. And stop all this infighting and all these little us versus them things. Mob mentality doesn't work. I'm sorry, Normal. It just doesn't work. That's all I got to say to you. Peace. Rise up on me place under curfew. Man in a green, man in a blue. From top to top, them quarrel we have in you.